and welcome to Adventures with Scars. I'm your host, Lauren Huffmaster. This episode is brought to you by Adventure Therapy Foundation, a nonprofit organization committed to addressing the emotional toll of cancer through innovative solutions. To learn more, go to adventuretherapyfoundation.org. Adventures with Scars is a discussion on the emotional side effects of cancer. Upon receiving a cancer diagnosis, we are briefed on the potential physical side effects we might encounter. This enables us to anticipate and prepare for change. However, guidance on the emotional impact of cancer is absent. On this podcast, we want to define the ways cancer impacts us beyond our physical health. Our hope is by talking about these other side effects of cancer, we will minimize their impact on those experiencing cancer today. Today, I'm talking with Melanie. Melanie is currently living with multiple myeloma. Melanie, thank you so much for being here today.
It's an honor to be asked to join you.
So we want to hear about your story. Tell us about a little bit about your cancer journey so far.
Sure. Well, I thought I would explain a little bit about multiple myeloma. It's, at least from my experience, when I talk to people about it, it's not a cancer that they've heard very much about, although it has been in the news recently. The linebacker coach, I'm probably not even saying that correctly, I'm not a football fan, for the San Francisco 49ers is living with multiple myeloma. So there was actually an article about him. Anyway, multiple myeloma is a blood cancer. It specifically lives in the bone marrow, and it's where plasma cells that are cancerous build up in the bone marrow, and it crowds out the normal and healthy cells that typically fight infection. And you have an abnormal protein called an M protein, and that's usually how it's detected, often by accident in routine blood work. And it's called multiple myeloma because it's multiple areas of the bone marrow that become affected. And interesting, the median age of people at diagnosis is usually 68. I'm currently 51. And it's more prevalent in the African American community than any other community. So it's just kind of interesting. So in 2017, I had a blood clot not related to cancer at all, but I was being followed by a hematologist, and I relocated from one city to another about a year later. And I had to find a new hematologist, and the one that I became connected with happens to be a specialist in blood cancers. And he was doing my regular follow-up and found some elevated protein in my blood, and just decided to do a little bit more thorough interview, basically talk to me a little bit about my life. And I told him I had been having a lot of back pain, and I had been seeing the chiropractor, and I wasn't getting any relief. And he immediately sent me for an MRI. And the MRI showed really extensive damage to my spine that wasn't characteristic of my age or my history. And so he started doing more testing, and he found something called MGUS, which stands for monoclonal gammopathy of unspecified significance. And it just basically means there's more protein in your blood, specifically M protein. And about 1% of people that have MGUS advance to multiple myeloma, but 100% of people that have myeloma had MGUS first. So it's, often a precursor, but not in that high percentage of people. And originally my doctor was like, it's nothing to worry about. We're just going to keep watching it. But for me, he did say I was at high risk for developing myeloma based on the markers that he was seeing. So about 2 years later, so this is 2021 now, he did detect what he called smoldering myeloma, which is basically, he called it watchful waiting. It's there, but it's not active. So if I had had a PET scan at that time, it wouldn't have come up. However, 6 months later, my pain had definitely increased, like bone pain had increased. And he decided to do a bone marrow biopsy and a PET scan and do the full workup. And it had elevated to full multiple myeloma at what he called standard risk. So the age for me when they found smoldering specifically was kind of significant. I was 49, and my mother died of breast cancer when she was 49, technically 2 weeks before her 50th birthday. So it was kind of a strange parallel for me. The age that I was diagnosed is the age, when she passed. And so I actually did something that was inspired by a friend of mine, Sadie. I decided that year, knowing that myeloma was probably coming, I did 50 things to celebrate turning 50. And in retrospect, the timing of that was really good, because at the completion of that year is when I got the formal diagnosis. It was actually December 22nd, 2023. I'm sorry, 2022. And so I did 6 months of chemo, and then started prepping for a stem cell transplant, which involved harvesting, which meant another kind of chemo to help increase the stem cell production. And that chemo was pretty hard on me, a little harder than I thought it was going to be. Like, they told me I wasn't going to lose my hair, that was going to come later. But I did, and it was pretty hard on me. I was a rock star when it came to collecting stem cells. I have plenty banked. I could have 3 stem cell transplants with what I have banked, but it was pretty hard on me. And then I spent 16 days in the hospital on the bone marrow transplant unit. And my transplant went really well. It was successful, but I did develop something called mucositis, which is these sores basically that happen in my mouth and in my throat, which meant I couldn't eat. So that was a little difficult. All in all, I've lost about 50 pounds, and I'm still struggling. I'm about 8 months post-transplant, and I'm actually still struggling with eating. So that's basically the journey. I'm considered in remission. However, myeloma doesn't have a cure like many cancers, and it's an interesting experience, because the doctor has been really clear. I will relapse. The question is when, and the rest of my life will be a series of treatments. And currently, my immune system isn't rebounding the way they had thought that it would. And my numbers are starting to change. And so they've actually been having conversations with me that could be this year that I relapse. So unfortunately, this remission could be really short-lived, but I don't know. So it's been an interesting experience having to change my idea of what my future would be, knowing that it will come back. It's not a matter of will it, it's just when will it, and how do I make the most of the time in between these seasons of treatment.
Thank you for telling us your story. And that gives us a really good idea of all the things you've been going through. And as you were talking, I was hearing physical changes. You talked about losing your hair, losing a lot of weight, not being able to eat. And we're talking about now ongoing physical changes. You're not really getting a break. You thought maybe you would recover quickly, but your immune system is so compromised, which causes lots of other side effects. So lot of changes physically changing in your body, but then also these ideas of who we were going to be, ideas of what's coming for us in terms of good things we could have planned. All these seem to be changing as well because of this potential relapse.
Yes. And, I've always been a person that plans. I am just I believe in preparation. And, I've had my life planned out, 20 years out. So that's been a really big change for me. It was very, very difficult. Probably the thing I've cried about the most is just losing that sense of security and control, really. Um, and having to do the whole one day at a time thing, like it's really the only way I'm getting through it. That's been very challenging for me. And some of the issues, I would call them issues, things that I've struggled with throughout my life, whether it's been um, self esteem or any issues I've had, seem to have been magnified through this cancer experience. So, for example, I'm single, and, you know, before being diagnosed, I was trying to do this whole dating thing. And, at my age, figuring that out, it's kind of complicated and not very easy. And then when, I got diagnosed, my doctor said, you know, you're the only person that's going to go through a transplant with me that's single. I've never had a single person go through this. And um you need to figure out your village because you can't be alone. You have to actually sign an agreement to have a 24/7 caregiver. And usually that's a spouse or significant other. And to me, the first thing I heard was, you are forever going to be single, and then, and honestly, it's been on my mind. Like, I couldn't figure it out before. And now, how will I find a partner in my life who is willing to walk right into the rest of my life is going to be full of, cancering? So that's definitely been kind of an emotional toll for me, changing what I thought, would be in my future in terms of relationships. Now, I have a fantastic village of people. My work family is amazing. My friends and my actual family are amazing. And people gave up a lot to help me through, this journey. But it's still a little bit interesting not being in a relationship and all of the insecurities. And then, like you mentioned, the changes in my body, those have definitely been magnified. Thinking about if I date again, I'm not even, I don't even know who I am when I look in the mirror. How do I, without that kind of self-confidence and self-assuredness, how would I ask anybody to feel confident about me when I'm not feeling that for myself?
You are talking about so many important things that it's significant. These are significant questions and concerns. A lot of people have to struggle with this idea of, after cancer, am I desirable? Am I strong enough? Who will want to take this burden on with me? Because I wouldn't choose this burden for myself. So how could I ask someone else to carry this with me? These are major concerns. And yes, for someone who's single, but also for people who are married, they don't know it once they're diagnosed and entering into this season, if their spouse will walk through this with them. And unfortunately, I know a lot of spouses who chose not to carry this out with someone who's impacted by cancer. But these are really important questions, and thoughts. And so, if you're listening and you are single, or you don't know if someone will walk beside you, you're not alone. We understand that this is something that's important. Also, if you are impacted by cancer and you don't know if you'll have children, and that's another piece of your identity you have to grieve and let go of, we just want to acknowledge you. These are major life griefs. When we talk about grief around cancer, we're not always talking about just around our mortality. We're talking about these daily questions that we have to sort of grieve and release, because we can't fix it. It's not something we can just make go away. There's nothing we can do to work hard enough to eliminate this problem. So it's something we have to carry forward, but it impacts all these ideas of who we are, our identity. And it, like you said, it magnifies these questions and makes them bigger because they're so far out of our hands. Before, they were just maybe a question of when and how, but now it's really a question of if. But I highly recommend you don't stop with if, but you say, what if, what is possible? What's beyond this for me? And just keep moving forward. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And I acknowledge you as well. This struggle of being alone through this, just, and it's hard to even as someone who's married, we don't always talk to our spouses about these cancering questions because our spouses are asking the same questions and probably have less answers than we'd like them to. But at least we have someone to let it go to, right? And so I acknowledge you in your journey with cancer but I'm so glad you have friends and good coworkers and family around you.
It's interesting because one of the ways that I have compensated, honestly, for being single is being married to my career. And I feel very fortunate that I found a career that I am passionate about, that I'm good at, that I can serve others while still being able to support my family. I'm grateful for that, but I didn't realize how difficult it would be in terms of my identity. So I'm back to work, but I'm only working part-time, and I had to transition from one position to another because I wasn't able to keep up with the demands of that previous position. And while my work family has been amazing and honoring and has, tried to make this possible, I feel I feel like I'm not giving enough back, and I almost feel undeserving, which I know isn't true, but of these kind of special, here, we'll figure this out for you. And not being able to return to full time, not having the energy, knowing I'm not at the top of my game, and then wondering, will I ever be able to return to full time? How does that look? That identity, that I had before that helped me get through kind of being single is now in question and is changing. And Sadie, who's my friend that I mentioned and my boss, said to me one day when I was really struggling with this, she said, I just hope that you can figure out, and I pray that you can figure out that you're more than what you produce. And I've been really struggling with that.
Yeah, a lot of people through adventure therapy, this has been a highlighted idea, but talking to a lot of people, it's hard for us to receive gifts when we don't know if we can repay them. And the strange thing is a gift is something we're just supposed to receive. We're not supposed to respond. If we respond, it would be more like a purchase or or interaction or, it would be more transactional, but a gift is something we're just supposed to receive. But strangely, through cancer, we have to sit back and receive a lot. And someone has to bring us food or drive us to treatment, or it's on and on and on, this state of receiving. And it's not comfortable. It's not easy. And a lot of people push back and don't want it. My experience with adventure therapy is we can have amazing retreats, like beachfront, beautiful weekends away, and people don't feel like they deserve it. They always say, give it to someone who deserves it more. And I say, you deserve it plenty. You don't have to deserve it more. It's a free gift. All you have to do is receive. And it's very, very difficult. But also in just life, receiving acknowledgement when you don't feel strong, and the strange thing about strength is it is when we don't feel strong that we're actually the strongest. If it was easy, then we wouldn't have to be strong. Like we wouldn't have to exert ourselves to the end of ourself. It is actually through the struggle that others see our strength. If we could walk through it without major, like sacrifice, then our strength wouldn't be as evident. But it is through our struggles that we demonstrate strength. But because we're struggling, we feel at our weakest. And so it's just a cycle of who am I and when am I good enough and what can I do that's going to give back enough, when instead sometimes cancer makes us sit back and just receive and just be acknowledged, and then learn to be okay with that. Learn that we are our being, just our presence, our being is a gift, not our doing, but our being. And it is a very, very hard lesson to learn.
Still working on it.
Definitely so. I'm working on it as well. when I was going back into chemo this time, we put out a list and said, if anybody wants to support us, feel free to send something on this list. And what I learned was lots of people wanted to support me, and I had no idea. There were so many things that showed up, but I also learned that all those Amazon packages that arrived on my door taught my kids like such an amazing lesson. First of all, that we weren't alone, that people loved us and they're willing to help us through, that we were seen, and that we could receive, and it was okay to be on the receiving side for once. And I was so glad that I could give my kids that lesson, even though I felt uncomfortable and I didn't really know how to do that very well. But I tell other people to do it, so I had to do it just because I tell other people to do it. But it was such a good lesson to teach my kids. I want to break that expectation that when you receive, you have to give back an equal or greater amount. I want to break that off my kids so that they can just be loved. That's all. You just can be loved. You don't have to prove anything or fix anything. It's just a receiving of love. And it's not a lesson that I do well, but we are all learning, and it's good growth. I really do think it's good growth for us. When you were talking about, you've talked a lot about your identity shifting. And in our philosophy of the emotional side effects of cancer, we talk about fear, isolation, and broken identity. And it seems like you've naturally brought up a lot of examples of what it feels like to have a broken identity. How does that feel when we say it out loud that this is a broken identity? What does that feel like to you?
Ooh. Honestly, there's some shame around that for me. And I know that there shouldn't be, like logically, I know that. But I also feel like, gosh, at this point in my life, I'm 51 years old. Identity shouldn't be such a hard thing for me. I shouldn't be struggling with this as much as I am because I didn't do anything to deserve this. It just happened, and I'm trying to roll with it the best I can. But I do feel a lot of shame around why is this such a big deal? Why am I perseverating on this? Um, I am working through that, and I think having really good people in my support circle that help remind me of the ways, like you said, that I can accept and that I'm a gift just for being in people's lives. That's helping, but I am having to try to redefine what that identity is. And I think back to, when I had children and I was so focused on my career that it was a difficult transition for me to figure out a new identity and kind of the fight between my career identity and my identity as a parent. So it's I fall back on that and go, it is possible. You redefined your identities then, and it is possible to redefine my identity, but I don't know exactly how to do it. But one of the things that I have been forced to learn is to let go of that, and that I don't have to have the answer. Letting go of anything, anybody that knows me really well, it's not one of my strong suits, but I am learning. Cancer has taught me I, there's only so much I can carry. It wasn't something I could control, so I need to focus on where I actually have influence, and that's how I'm feeling day to day and what I can accomplish today. And I've let go of the I don't have to have the identity figured out. It'll just happen.
Absolutely. And you are only in your first year after cancer. And that is what I've defined as the void. It is that season of literally letting go of that past identity, because some of it's being taken away and we don't have a choice, and we have to, but our tendency is to sort of keep clawing, keep grabbing, go back to, if we can't have this, we'll have just this, the step down from that, even though it may not be serving us well in this current state. But that void season is the most difficult part of the cancer experience. I strongly believe this. Um, and it is this season of where you just learn to be okay with where you are. Just like you said, you don't have those identities that you used to have, but you don't know where you're going yet. That is exactly the void, this empty space in between. And we have to become comfortable in that moment, in that space, before we can, in a healthy way, take on a new identity. But our lives and maybe society has taught us, but we're used to being busy and full and knowing and being confident about where, what we should be doing and all these things. And the void is the exact opposite. It is really a season of rest, this empty place of rest, where even in your identity, it's a rest. You don't have necessarily confidence in an identity in the season of the void, because you are learning to release what was and learning to open up yourself to any new possibility of what's to come. And not knowing what that is, it's hard to be okay with what might come. So it's this true release of past and future, and learning just to sit in the present, even though the present is not where you want to be. It's this releasing space, but it is so difficult, but is actually the most life-changing season of any other of the other seasons, because this is where you start to truly see yourself. Like you said, not for what you do, not how you serve other people, but to see yourself right here where you are. And as long as we're busy and as long as our life is full, it's very easy just to see what's around us and not to truly see ourselves. But on the other hand, like you mentioned, all that we see in ourselves is magnified. The good, the bad, the fear, the shame, all of that is magnified. And we have to start to be okay with that too. Just be okay with what is inside of us. And and I'm telling you, the void is the most beautiful season. It's like the season when a seed is underground and it hasn't burst forth yet. It's maybe not visible. Nobody else can see it, but down there it is ready to burst forth into something beautiful. But right now, just like outside in the early spring, end of winter, there's so many things just dormant underground waiting for the right season to come. And that's what the void really feels like, but it is uncomfortable and it is not easy.
For sure. But it's a gift. I mean, it is. I have really worked on seeing the things that are gifts through this experience. And, I wore that busyness as a badge of honor my entire life. I have never known how to nap if I'm not doing something. I think, I should be productive. And um, now I'm trying to focus on doing the right things instead of just doing things and being busy. And that's a gift that I almost wish I had received earlier, because I can see where I've wasted some time, and it's okay to sit in silence and it's okay to sit and rest. I didn't even really know what that was until my body forced me to do it, but it truly has been something that I'm grateful for.
Absolutely. It is the greatest gift, because just like you said, you were busy before, but you didn't even, it wasn't maybe even intentional, or it wasn't even, reflecting who you are, but you were just busy. And so now you get to curate what fills your life, curate what, through the wisdom that you have today at 50, through the wisdom of cancer, through the wisdom of all the things you've learned, you get to start with this blank slate and put beautiful intentional things there that really truly reflect you. And that is the gift. Just like you said, this is like the post-traumatic growth, right? This is where we get to say, like, all this stuff before, it was fine and good, but it wasn't the best. And now I'm going to only live for into what's the best for me. So you brought up the gift. So we love to talk about the gifts of cancer, because we believe that in every circumstance, good or bad, there are good things for us to find. And so can you talk about the gift of cancer, something that really stands out to you?
For me, I think living the concept of interdependence has been a gift. It wasn't something I was good at before. It was something I preached. I mean, I work with people with disabilities, and I've spent, an entire career telling people that independence really isn't the goal, right? True happiness and true success comes from interdependence. But I really meant that for everybody else. I didn't mean that for me, because I needed to be able to do everything completely on my own. And so that's been a gift for me, is understanding that applies to me as well, and that truly my life is better. it's deeper, it's more rich. My relationships are more profound, and actually more relaxing as a result of me allowing that level of interdependence, both in my personal relationships and in my work world. uh, I think I'm producing better things now that I'm not trying to do it all by myself. And again, logically, I understood that, right? You know, the more people, the more diverse opinions, the better the content and the product is in the end. But I still always wanted to be able to do it 100% on my own. So I do feel like that's a gift. And then, you know, obviously the gift of presence. I feel like I've always had a heart for gratitude. I've been somebody that says thank you and tries to tell people what I appreciate about them, but I wasn't really doing that in terms of how I'm living and being truly present, and that's definitely a shift. Um, I even got a tattoo post diagnosis that it's the symbol of gratitude and then the word present. And it's my sister's handwriting, and she got the same tattoo, but with my handwriting.
Oh.
And it's just a reminder that even though, again, we know we need to be present in the moment, but I was not truly present in the way that I am now. I just am soaking everything in and allowing my bucket to be filled in spontaneous moments, in little moments from people that I'm not best friends with, um, in different experiences. Whereas before, I always tried to kind of mastermind and calculate and plan all of that. Like I would plan being present. So what? It's just a deep connection to the moment that I didn't have before, and I'm really grateful for that. And if anything, that's something I'd like my children to see, you know, because they've said, "Wow, you know, you don't." I'll say I don't care. They're like, "Do you really not care?" You know, or I'll say it's up to you. Is it really up to me? Because I wasn't that way before, and they've noticed that change, and I hope that it does them some good as well.
Often what we find is what we're looking for, right? So you said maybe people who fill you up may not be your best friend. And I can be guilty of that too. I'm waiting for that one person who's going to be like my best friend and he's going to stand beside me through all the things. And, there's TV shows about cancer patient and her best friend and they're inseparable. And I just wait for someone to be that person for me. But while I'm looking for something that's not there, I forget to see what is there, right? There's not one person, but maybe there's 40 other people who show up in 40 different little moments. And that can fill us up. And it's actually stronger over time, stronger over time for us to stand on having lots of people around us. But we have to be looking for that. We have to see their presence and see their heart and receive that. Again, it goes back to what we're willing to receive. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything important for you to say?
I don't think so. I mean, the only other thing that was on my mind is when we were talking about, you know, the physical changes. Um, I have definitely really struggled with that. And, you know, before my cancer diagnosis, I have heard people say that I look a lot like my mother, which has always meant a lot to me. But now that I've lost my hair and my skin has changed, I look, you know, older, I look more tired, all of those things. Um, when I look in the mirror, I see my mother, but I see her at the end of her life. And it's been really, really challenging for me. Like I've really struggled with, that's not how I want to remember her. I mean, I'm really glad that I was there with her, but it's made me kind of face things in a different way a little bit. And um And the way I've been dealing with that is trying to be a little bit more authentic in the way I share that. Like I've actually talked to people a little bit more than I ever would about these kinds of things. Um, but it has definitely brought up loss that I experienced with my mother in just a different way than I wasn't totally expecting that. I mean, it's been 30 years since my mother passed away, and it's brought up a lot for me, which I didn't really expect. But um, again, a gift that's come from that is that authenticity in terms of talking to people about how I'm feeling about that, and learning to take a compliment even if I think the person is just being nice. Yeah, we love you with crazy short spiky in between growing hair. It's really hip. Okay. But I'm going to take that, right? Because I need it right now. So anyway, it's a struggle that I didn't quite expect, and bringing up some of the memories of loss, of my mother.
Absolutely. In many ways, our griefs are all connected. They go down a long chain. And when we have a new grief, it can trigger prior griefs, especially if they were they're obviously your mother's loss was tied to cancer, but it's also a very huge change in your identity and in your life. And so now as your identity shifts again, it's only natural that it's going to trigger some of those old griefs and pains. But but it also gives us a chance to heal in places if those prior griefs we hadn't fully healed from. These new opportunities to trigger those allow us the opportunity to grow and change and acknowledge them. And that is can become a gift. It's painful at first, that later can become a gift. So thank you for sharing that. I just want to acknowledge you and all that you've done, and all you shared today here. It's not an easy path that you're on, and we just appreciate that you share your story, because there are a lot of other people out there who are not on easy paths as well, and your story is going to inspire them and help them take that next step. So thank you, Melanie, today for encouraging us with your story. If this conversation has been meaningful to you, please check out the other episodes of our podcast or dig a little deeper by checking out other resources available at adventuretherapyfoundation.org.